I'm Rosalind Carita, and this is History and Heritage. Today we're going to take a look at something really special. We are with Billy Frank Morrison, and he has a collection of postcards, a huge collection of postcards, and we're going to take a look at some Clarksville history that was captured in these postcards, as well as some other very interesting, beautiful postcards that give you a picture back in time. So stay with us, we'll be right back.
Will you become a guardian angel? The Humane Society has been saving lives and helping families since 1968. We are an independently operated nonprofit organization, and the strength of our programs relies solely on donations and grants. Your donation will allow us to save animals from the local county shelter, as well as provide low-cost spay-neuter vouchers and more. All of our programs are geared toward providing families with options that prevent them from surrendering personal or found pets, which might otherwise be euthanized at a shelter. Please be a guardian angel today.
This is Billy Frank Morrison, and he has been collecting postcards how long?
For 40 years.
40 years. I know you love this. I actually found out about this, as long as I've known you and as many times as I have been to history meetings, I didn't know you collected these. So when I saw that, I thought, we got to show these. So tell us where you started.
Okay, a lot of people think I'm a historian, but
you are.
but my knowledge of history is very narrowly defined. Other people think I'm a writer, but again, all my writing is related to postcards. What I am is a deltiologist. That's a student of and collector of vintage postcards.
So say that word again.
Deltiology.
Deltiology. Now see, I didn't know that there was a name for that. I'm sure that that's a Greek. It sounds Greek.
Yes, it's someone who collects paper. Or
okay.
A deltiologist dives into deltiology.
Okay. Well, so you, I read the article about you, and it said that your dad kind of encouraged you to collect something.
My daddy was a collector, and he always had a cigar box under the front seat of his car. And every time I'd come home, he would say, I know what you need to collect. And he would show me this cigar box, and one time it had class rings in it. Once it was arrowheads, marbles, and nothing ever impressed me. I came home one time and he had an old cigar box full of postcards, and for some reason it just got me fired up about
Clicked.
Postcards.
Yeah.
Oh. And from there, I got to hear 165,000 postcards.
Oh my gosh, that is a lot.
It is.
And didn't you, it seems like I read something about when you were in the Navy, when you sort of began collecting?
Yes. Well, I used postcards exclusively to communicate with friends and family back home while the Navy was sending me all over the world. So toward the end of my career, I began to collect some that were sent back to me. But I really got started collecting when I was teaching high school back in the late 70s, early 80s. I did that for a very short period of time, but I had a class one time, and it was on Women of Perspective. It was a current events class, and so I was trying to get the kids interested, and usually visual aids helped. So I created something. This is not it, but it was something like this. This is just a potpourri of cards.
Okay.
But the one I did then was all about women and how they had changed in American society. And it worked well. So when I finished that 6-week study, I started to throw those cards away and realized that they were very pretty and appealed to me. And one of them was of a woman standing on a corner in Clarksville. And that afternoon, I made it a point to go by that location only to find that the building and certainly the woman were both gone. And
was that on this?
No.
No, okay, so that was
no.
a different, but this is similar.
yeah,
Okay.
very similar to what I did.
Okay, so,
And I continue to use things like this when especially with young people,
right, to see
they
that
seem
big,
to
right,
appeal
really.
to things visual. And from there, I just started collecting a little bit of everything. And I have a number of collections. This is Elvis Presley. Now, these are not common cards of Elvis Presley. These are cards
wow.
that he used to send on special
Very
occasions.
handsome young Elvis Presley. And
That
we
he is-
just, Elvis's, the anniversary of his death was just a
Yes.
few days ago.
And I have a really good friend, Deveda Elliott, Deveda Presley now, who is from Clarksville, and she married Vernon Presley.
Ah,
And
okay, look at these. We'll have to make sure that we can, gosh, there's a million of them. Oh, they're wonderful. Oh, look at this. Elvis is a very, very young.
and that's Brenda Lee, the country music singer.
Oh my gosh. And Brenda Lee is still, she is still around and vibrant and just has all sorts of stories. I've heard her speak a number of times and she's clever and funny. Okay, so Elvis. Now see, that is very different.
Yeah, and surprisingly, there's a Clarksville connection because of Deveda Elliott, who married his father.
Right.
And she lived with the Presleys for 17 years.
You know, I didn't know that. That is interesting.
Yeah, she met him in Germany. She and her first husband were stationed there, and Elvis made it a point to identify people from Tennessee and invite them over for cookouts. And that happened, and then later she was divorced, and she and Vernon met each other for a second time, and they were married, and she was married to him until his death.
I had no idea. Oh, so that's a Clarksville connection.
Some of them have Clarksville connections and some of them don't. This is a collection of leap year cards. Now, they're kind of hard to find.
Leap year, the silent proposal, it says.
Yes. New Year's cards, greeting cards are easy to find, but it's more difficult to find the
1904. And so do you go some certain, oh my goodness, that is beautiful. Do you go, how would you come upon something like this that is clearly older? You know, do you,
Well, they have postcard shows, and I attend many of those. But I also go to estate sales and antique shops and those kinds of places and ferret them out.
And each one of these you have protected in a special?
I put them in a hard sleeve because there's a aerodynamic thing about a postcard. If you drop it, it will float around and land on a corner and bend it, and then the next thing you know, that corner's broken off. So you put them in these hard sleeves, and then you can be rough with them and not have to worry about it.
That is so clever. Leap year cards, who'd have thought? And I know you have some interesting, you told me, we kind of talked about Civil War, and we know that now is the sesquicentennial of the Civil War, and you had a collection of Jeff Davis.
I do.
And I see him, this is quite a lot of postcards.
Well, these are only samples of the collections I have. I have 5 times this many of Jeff Davis. This is he and his daughter.
Okay.
And he, of course, was born up here in right near Hopkinsville. And this is the monument that is there, dedicated to him.
And I have seen that.
Another monument that was dedicated to him, and that Confederate flag is people. That's a young Jefferson Davis, and this is older. You can kind of see what the war and imprisonment and all of the things that happened to him did to him.
Right.
And it always amazed me that in later years, he and Abraham Lincoln resembled a great
You know,
deal.
as you say that, You can see that.
Uh-huh.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then these are other
Monuments dedicated to him, and they were all over the South.
goodness.
And then the other cards are just a potpourri. This is where he was captured before he was in prison.
Oh my goodness. Now that's amazing, where he was captured.
Mm-hmm. And this is where he was imprisoned.
And where is this?
This is in Virginia. And this is the man that was put in charge of him while he was in prison.
And that's something you certainly don't even ever think about. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Hampton Roads, where he was imprisoned. After the war in the South, throughout the South, there were a lot of monuments dedicated to him, and there were also a lot of buildings named for him.
Okay.
And this is just some of them.
And of course, we don't, we don't see that anymore.
No. This is the church up near Hoptown that he was a member of.
You know,
It's in Fairview.
That is so interesting because I don't think we really think about that as being part of such local history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly it's not in Clarksville, but that's awfully close.
Uh-huh.
Ah,
And this is the home that he was born in.
near Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be darned. And so are these kind of things, does that still exist? Is that open to?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The monument is still there. The home is still there, a replica of the home now. And the old church is still there. And these are some of the Confederate capitals where he served during the war.
I'll be. Those are amazing. Oh, now here, this is something.
It's a 3D card.
Huh. That is very different. Ah, well, what have we got that is Clarksville?
Clarksville?
Yes.
Can we move around to the
Yes,
other side
we
of the table?
can.
Well, these are Nightrider cards, tobacco Nightriders from the Nightrider, from the
Okay.
tobacco wars of the early 1900s.
Now those are very scary, and the tobacco wars. Just kind of sum that up a little bit.
Well, Buck Duke, who lived on the East Coast, had a monopoly on tobacco. And when he had a $15 million estate there, he was buying the best tobacco in the world from the tobacco farmers in Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky for 3 cents a pound. It was starvation prices. So the farmers organized up here in Guthrie and agreed that they would not sell Duke their tobacco until he raised the prices.
Okay.
And if farmers did sell to him, they would burn their tobacco barns, salt their fields, and occasionally kill them. And this worked. It was.
So it was Guthrie farmers, or just local
It
farmers?
was local farmers, both in Tennessee and Kentucky, and this was a very divisive event that happened.
Right.
People were on one side or the other. Nobody straddled the fence on this. They were.
And this, how old is this?
These were all back between 1901 and 1907, right in that time period. And after they did that here, some of the Nightriders then moved over to Reelfoot Lake and tried to do something similar with commercial fishing. They weren't as successful, but they did attempt that.
Now this picture, Parade, Dark Tobacco, 1905, Guthrie, Kentucky. So this was kind of demonstrating the strength of the organization.
Showing that they were organized and of one accord about this effort.
That is amazing. And tell me about this.
That's over at Reelfoot Lake, and that's where 2 people were hanged by the Nightriders the night before. One of them succumbed to that hanging. The other managed to escape. They were federal troops that had been sent in to break up this organized effort.
That is incredible. That's incredible history. You know, I always have sort of known about the tobacco wars, but this, as we have said, gives you a real picture in time of what happened.
These are federal troops coming in. They were sent in on several occasions, and there was some violence between the Nightriders and the federal troops.
Very interesting. So Nightriders, huge piece of history, and then I've kind of mixed these up, I'm afraid.
No, you're fine.
So if we wanted to see maybe some buildings that were in Clarksville that aren't here anymore, would there be some that we could lay out here?
I have more than 7,000 postcards of Montgomery County, so I have, this is a card from Dogwood, Tennessee, which was a suburb of Clarksville years
Really?
ago.
Okay, now let me orient this. Okay, so when would this have been taken?
This would have been about 1907.
Okay. Greetings from Dogwood, Tennessee. All right.
And these are some local cards, not Clarksville, but I wanted to show you a couple of them. There's Ashland City, the old blanket store between here and Nashville.
Blanket store. Oh my goodness. Between here and Nashville. A blanket store.
It was in Pleasant View.
Oh my
They got their blankets from the blanket factory in Springfield. They bought all their seconds and they sold them there on 41.
I'll be darned. I mean, and that's gone, and you bring it back to life.
That's the Cumberland River when it was froze over.
Oh my goodness, when would this have been?
Well, before the TVA came in and put the dams on the river, it was not unusual for it to get very low and it would freeze over in the winters. And it would, in fact, get so low in the summers that you could walk across it.
Oh my.
But once they started regulating the river and ensuring traffic safety for the boats, that doesn't happen any longer.
Oh my gosh.
This is a Cumberland Presbyterian Church in Burns, Tennessee, which is down near Dixon. Charlotte, Tennessee.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Charlotte.
That's the only postcard I've ever seen of Charlotte, Tennessee. And I've been doing this 47 years.
Oh my goodness. Well, we've been to Charlotte a million times. That's where they always have the baseball tournaments for the little leaguers. And I can assure you, we know that road. Oh my. And so what's our date on this?
That's got to be early. Let me see what kind of card it is. You can tell by the back of the card. That's what's called an undivided back. The only thing you were allowed to put on there was the mailing address. If you wanted to write on it, you had to do it on this side of the card. So that was between 1900 and 1907.
Amazing. There's so many things that we just don't even know that you can recognize when you see it.
And that's what they called back then an aerial view of Erin. And when they said aerial view back then, they meant from the top of a tree or from a hillside, not from an airplane.
Okay, I wondered if maybe I was trying to imagine maybe they had a hot air balloon or something.
No. Later, there would be some true aerial views.
Right. But how beautiful. So up in a tree.
Just another card of Waverly.
Okay, in Waverly. Now these are just all around here.
Beautiful card, I thought, of Dixon.
Oh, yes.
This
Gosh.
is a football team at the Cumberland City Academy, and Fred Landis' father thought he could identify those players for me, and I had we had made an appointment, and he fell ill and died before we got together.
Oh, and he was such a wonderful gentleman.
He was,
Oh,
yes.
gosh.
So was Fred.
Oh, these are marvelous.
That's an institution that was...
Bumpus Mills.
And Bumpus Mills is not a place you find a lot of postcards of.
Yep. Amazing. Oh.
Mary Frances Beth, most people will remember her, a well-known teacher who lived here until she was 100 years old, taught school there.
gosh. And here we
School
are.
in Ashland City.
Central High School. Now that building is not there anymore.
No.
Most of these buildings are not there.
Many of them are not.
Oh gosh. So how about this? I'm seeing views of Clarksville, Tennessee. And Billy Frank, you have got so much here that's incredibly interesting. So tell me about this.
This is what I call a generic kind of card, but it has about 8 views of Clarksville on it.
I see.
Now, all those views appear singularly on other cards.
Okay.
Many of the banks would send their customers a card notifying them that their mortgage was due or things of that nature.
Okay.
And they would always have a calendar on those.
1914. Incredible. Ah, okay.
And these cards would not appear to be from Clarksville, but they were done by the Clarksville Ice and Coal Company.
Ah,
And they did war scenes or pictures of our Navy ships or things of that nature.
1909.
And then did their advertisements on the back.
Now that is very clever. So we don't see Clarksville, but it is Clarksville. That's very different than what we think of in terms of the picture.
And that's the A.H. Patch Farm. The gentleman who designed and patented the Black Hawk corn shelter.
Of course.
And that was over at Austin P, where he sat down at the dinner table one night and drew that out on a brown piece of paper and became very wealthy as a result of it.
How wonderful. That is true Clarksville history.
And that's one of the older buildings, the Bert Building in Clarksville, that is now gone.
Oh,
And the Sea and Sirloin down on the river.
yes.
A popular
Yes.
spot to eat. Many people came up to the back of it in their boats. It
Oh.
was right on the Cumberland River.
Gosh, Tasty Freeze.
Yes. I only found that card recently and paid $50 for it.
Oh, goodness.
It's not an old card, 1953, but I had never seen it. And when you've been looking for 47 years and you see a card you've never seen, there's a good chance.
Good
that
reason to get it. Lou Heimelson, of course.
Louis had his place on the square down there where he bought furs and all kinds of scrap metals and everything, and eventually moved it over onto the bypass where it is today.
Yes, indeed.
And these are the Oddfellows Orphanage and Home that was up at the top of Boot Hill.
Yes.
They raised that a few years ago. It was there from 1898 to 1947, and it was a home for unwed mothers, orphaned children, and some elderly handicapped.
Oh. And then these.
There are only 3 views to my knowledge of the fire stations in Clarksville, and that
Oh, goodness, look at that.
those.
Now, what kind of date are we looking at here?
I think, I believe this is in 1936.
Okay.
This
These are horse
device
drawn.
here, yes, they were, before they were horse drawn, before they could afford to buy the horses, the men pulled them.
Okay. And a far cry from this one,
Uh-huh.
much more modern, Clarksville Fire Department,
Yes.
Clarksville, Tennessee. So we do have a lot of pictures. Oh, wow. And what have we here?
That was the Clarksville Hospital. It was on the grounds where the academy is today and
Right.
was a part of that complex.
Beautiful. It looks very similar to the Traherne Mansion, doesn't it?
It does.
That architecture is very similar.
This is Dr. Burt, the black physician's office that was
Very
just
famous,
off of-
right.
Yes.
Home infirmary.
And Dr. Frank Runyan worked with him. He died, Burt died, I believe, in the 1980s. His
And of
wife
course-
lived there for years afterwards.
And of course, those are both famous names here, Bert and Runyan. You
They
know,
are. This is the old federal building, was the post office, was the agricultural office where you went in and got your tobacco allotment.
Oh my gosh, these are just too wonderful.
And you mentioned the Traherne Mansion
Yes.
a moment ago, and that's it.
That's
after
it.
a snowfall.
Oh,
And we were talking about the Runyans, and that's the old Runyan home.
oh my. That is beautiful. The architecture on that is phenomenally interesting, isn't it? Well, you know, you've got so much wonderful Clarksville. We're going to have to do another show. But before we finish with this show, you had a very unusual kind of postcard that you said it was designed to be held up to the light. Can you show us those? I'll get my little reading glasses out of the way here, and we will.
The guy who named these was really creative. He called them hold to light postcards.
That is incredible.
These were all in the early 1900s as well, up through about 19.
How creative. Now show me the other ones. Those are phenomenal. Let's show those without the light. And why don't you pick out a favorite postcard for us to use to close the show and show us something that you really want us to see, and we're going to plan to come back and do this again because you've got phenomenal.
I have so many favorites, it isn't even funny, but the Dion Quintets from Canada are one of my favorites. I have a collection of cards of them, and
I'm sure, you know, I'm familiar with the Quints, but that's even before our time. So give us a little history on the Quints because that's very, very interesting.
yeah, the most amazing thing about them is that the Canadian government took them away from their parents.
Now they were born, these were 5 children born at the same time, and this was before the days of so many multiple births because of fertility medicines. So this was big news. So the
Right.
government took those
And
children away.
The government proclaimed that no parents were capable of taking care of 5 children by themselves. So the government took them, took their home,
This is phenomenal. I mean, can you imagine this happening today?
covered the front of the home with glass, put a walkway up in front of it, and charged the public to view the children just in their everyday activities. And the parents never got these children back, and all of them, I believe all of them are still living, and they are all very reclusive today.
That is amazing. Now, this is something we certainly didn't think that we were going to learn in history, but it is history. It's not Clarksville history, but we're going to come back and do more. You know, the other funny story that you told us about was this actress who is from Clarksville, and I wanted to show this postcard. And Billy Frank, tell us what you said was so unusual about this one.
Dorothy Jordan, born at 10th and Madison, lived here until she went to Hollywood. There was a big controversy in Hollywood because of this picture, and I read the article in the newspaper back in that appeared in 1933, and they talked about assets that girls have and how they were willing to show them for money. It sounded like you were talking about an audition for Playboy magazine or something, but what it was is she was the first actress to be photographed with her bare feet showing. And the article said you could even see her toes.
So
That's
that
the
is
story.
some Clarksville history. And this is your history and your heritage. And I want to thank you, Billy Frank. This has been so interesting. You have so much, and I hope you'll let us come back and do another show.
Well, absolutely. I have to do better the next time than I did this.
This is wonderful. I think that we've shown some Clarksville history and heritage.